Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast on the Her Hoop Stats Podcast Network. I'm Crina Mustafa alongside Calvin Wetzel. And oh my God, do we have a packed episode for you this week. If you missed our last two episodes, we were blessed to have two very special guests. 2 weeks ago, we had Ari Chambers come on the pod. And just last week, we had Gonzaga senior Brenna Maxwell. So in case you haven't listened to those two episodes, make sure you go back after this one and catch them. And then this week, Cal and I are doing a solo pod again for the first time in a few weeks. Cal, there's a lot to get through. We're going to talk about W free agency, some college ball, some Olympic qualifiers that are coming up too. How are you feeling and are you ready?
Ooh, I'm feeling overwhelmed, but in such a good way. There's so much basketball happening. We graduated from pancakes to loaded baked potatoes. How loaded this episode is, and I'm so ready to dive into all of it.
All right, that's great. The metaphors are evolving, and I'm not sure how much people will love that, but we're rolling with it. Let's start with WNBA free agency. As we know, the official signing period started on February 1st, and after a lot of complaints that it was pretty quiet, I would say it's been a very noisy week in terms of W free agency news. We'll go through kind of each team rather than just like point to each specific player because a lot of teams made a couple of moves and we'll just kind of grade them and kind of give our thoughts on it. And of course, we have to start with the Seattle Storm because the day that they're recording on Monday, the breaking news was that was broken by Shanae on NBA Today was that Nneka Ogwumike will be signing with the Seattle Storm. And then Nneka posted her own Instagram post as well just seconds later, went on the show. They had very beautiful conversations. But that is like just one of the big moves that Seattle has made so far. But let's just kind of get our initial reactions on that. Cal, how do you feel about Nneka to Seattle?
I love it, and how cool is it that she got to you break that news with her sister? By the way, really
Oh,
special
I
moment for
loved
them.
it. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. But NECA really, I think, slots into this team perfectly with what else they already had, and then have been adding, of course, Skylar Diggins-Smith as well, who we should mention. Already had Jewell, Loyd, and Ezzy McMagor. I feel like it's a big four right now. You're talking about four all-star players in this starting lineup, and they just took a year off. They took the Storm are one of the more dominant franchises for several years. They took a year off. Jewell got to go average 50 points a game, and the rest of those young players got to develop, which I think is going to be really huge for them as they sort of transition back into being an elite team and a team where those players are going to be much more role players than asked to really carry any type of big load that some of them had to last year. So I love where this franchise is going. And I agree so much with our friend Owen Pence, who tweeted this, that like it's so cool for Jewell, Loyd specifically, who has bridged this gap from the Sue Bird, Jewell, Loyd, Breanna Stewart era to this era, for her to stay and stick it out through last year and then come back and be a part of this new era of Storm basketball. It's so cool.
Yeah, and speaking of last year, I was able to talk to Noelle Quinn, head coach, a couple of times in media and just kind of ask her a little bit about Jewell Loyd and what she's seen from her and kind of the leadership side of things. And she always just like shone when talking about Jewell and just kind of really emphasize how big of a leader Jewell has kind of become, as you said, like in that post Suey, in that post Sue Bird era. And I think these moves are incredible. Like that is such an ideal spot to be in as a team, to have to only be bad for 1 year after being one of the most dominant teams, one of the most consistent teams, and just acquire, as you said, Nneka, Skylar, you have Ezzy, like, and it's just like now you're in a place where, and I saw Cora Hall tweet this too, where they had last year rookie Jordan Horston now is in such an amazing environment to learn from some of these vets in the leagues, where the first year obviously was kind of going through the motions a little bit, was learning from Jewell Loyd, but had to carry a lot as a rookie. And now you head into your sophomore year and you're surrounded by Skylar Diggins-Smith and Nneka and Jewell again. And it's just a lot of leadership, a lot of veteran presence to kind of complement the younger players on that squad too. And I am just so excited to see what storm is brewing in Seattle.
Ooh, you had to get a pun of your own in there after you made fun of me for one earlier. I love it.
Yeah.
That's a great point though about Horston and like Dulcie Finca-Mengiadu, I think is another one who's gonna really benefit from playing, with Nneka and back to Jewell. Like it was fun to kind of see her pop off last year. Obviously led the league in scoring, career high, but her efficiency was down because of course it was like when you are playing on a team like that and carrying that load. When you look at kind of how she has been used in the last few years of her career and how she's going to be used this year, I think it's really cool that we're going to get to see Jewell back to it, maybe her gaudy like 30-point scoring outbursts were going to be more last year, but I think she's going to thrive more this year in terms of like when you look at last year, when you look at 2 years ago, spot up, she took almost a fifth of her shots spot up, and she only ISO'd like 5% of the time. All right, last year both of those were basically even. She was having to ISO so much more. Obviously, wasn't getting as many spot up opportunities. But playing next to Skylar Diggins-Smith in particular, you can talk about all of them, but in particular, having an all-star point guard again next to her, I think is going to really free her up to fully get in her bag and be used to the best of her kind of offensive capabilities.
Oh, so exciting. I'm so excited for the Seattle Storm. I know you are too. I think, would you say they're like, and last thing before we move on to a different team, would you say they're like winning free agency right now? If you had to
Yes.
say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so they're the clear front runner. Let's go to a couple of these other teams. One being the Phoenix Mercury, who went kind of sneaky and got some pretty good signings. Natasha Cloud leaves Washington, leaves her home, signs with the Phoenix Mercury. They also received Beck Allen in a sign and trade with Connecticut that sent Mariah Jefferson there. Oh my God. First of all, of course, my first thought is that Beck and Michaela Aniwere are reunited, from their New York days. Of course, that was like my introduction to covering the league. I covered it in mixed rookie year. That was my first year of covering the W's. So they kind of have a special place in my heart. So that was kind of like my first, like, oh my God. But how big are these two pickups for Phoenix?
Massive, because this was the worst defense in the league last year, without question. I think whether you just watch them or whether you look at the numbers, however you want to slice it. And obviously, you have a rim protector in Brittany Griner. You have Bree Turner, who's a very solid defensive four. But now you bring in Natasha Cloud, elite perimeter defender, the point of attack, and Beck Allen, a 3-and-D wing, who obviously is another one that can really shore up your perimeter defense. And now all of a sudden you have 1 through 5, other than maybe Diana Taurasi, a lot of elite defenders on this team. And I think that's really something that they needed to shore up. And obviously they addressed it. So I'm interested to see kind of how it all fits together. There's going to be some growing pains right away and probably on offense in particular, but they really addressed some needs as well. And they're, I think, clearly going to take a step up from last year.
Yeah, and I think like even it's cool too because they're both defensive players, but they're also defensive players who can get you a bucket. Beck Allen being the shooter that she is, Natasha Cloud being the scorer that she is. I think they are two of the most exciting two-way players in the league, and I think those are absolutely amazing pickups for Phoenix. I'm interested to see what other moves they start to make. I think BG is still a free agent, right? Like we haven't heard yet.
Technically, I
What
think
the
that is
situation-
true. Yeah, I shouldn't
Yeah.
say they officially still have a rim protector, but I don't think anyone is expecting her to go anywhere
You're
else.
speaking it into existence. It's okay. I got you. I
Yes.
got you. But yeah, so very curious to see what continues to happen with Phoenix, but those are some very exciting moves to kind of start off in this offseason where they are going through a lot of changes right now. Let's go to another team, the Minnesota Lynx, which also made a couple of moves. They were able to retain Bridget Carlton for another 2 years. Then they kind of did a little poaching from the Chicago Sky, who are having a pretty rough free agency, if we're going to be real here. And I do feel for Sky fans, but the Minnesota Lynx signed both Courtney Williams and Alana Smith. And they also traded for Natisha Heidemann. Cal, what do you think about these moves? I think first of all, like it's super cool that Courtney and Alana get to kind of be together. And I love Courtney Williams as well too, so I'm super excited to see how this kind of fits. But what is your kind of overall thoughts on the Lynx and their direction too?
I love Courtney Williams too. I think I've talked about her before on this podcast
Yeah, I
or
remember
some
when
podcast.
I accidentally called her mid-range mommy, and then it was like
That was it.
it ended up being something else. I don't even remember at this point. But yeah, no, we love her on this pod.
Yeah, but that was a great one. I think she liked that one. She tweeted that out.
Yeah, she
Shout
called
out
us
to Courtney.
crazy, I think.
Well, hey, whatever. I think she
In a
liked
good
it. I
way.
feel like she
In a
liked it.
good way. Yeah. She's into some
I don't
hearts.
know.
It was all good.
Yeah. It was a good call by you. I love this pickup by them and Natasha Heidemann. I think both of these players come in and address. Again, it's all about addressing needs. What we're talking about with these teams, and the Lynx have kind of cobbled together for the last few years, basically a bunch of wings. And I mean, they had Sylvia Fowles, and then she retired, and they haven't really had any sort of like when you talk about point guard play and then center play, other than Sylvia Fowles, it's been I'm not sure what the word, a revolving door, or just not. I wouldn't say that they have necessarily been elite at those positions, and now they bring in 2 point guards who neither one is obviously like some type of Chelsea Gray Hall of Fame elite level point guard, but they're both very solid playmakers. And when you have two of them, that obviously really helps a lot too. You're always going to have one of them on the court for 40 minutes if you want to. I think they can make plays, especially Courtney Williams in particular. I think out of the pick and roll, which is big. And like what you talked about in Phoenix, like they can hit shots too. Natasha Heidemann is one of the best tough shot makers, I think, in the league. So this is going to really help them a lot. I know some people are not really sure about the direction that the Lynx are headed. I like where they're going right now, because I think when you have Nafisa Collier, she's sort of entering her prime. Obviously, you want to do as much as you can with that window, and so giving her some playmakers on the perimeter, I think, is a big deal.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest factors that I really like about all these moves too is there's going to be a change in the locker room in terms of just like the energy too. Like obviously we know a lot of the tension that happened with like Ariel Powers, who we're also going to talk about that she's on a different team now too. And you bring in someone like Courtney Williams, who I had the pleasure of covering her when she was on the Sky versus the Lynx last year in Canada, which is kind of ironic when you think back on it, but her, and I was able to watch her in a Chicago Sky practice. Her energy is super infectious. Like she is the glue that motivates everybody. She has that leadership within her, and I think that is such a strong addition to this Lynx locker room. And there's so many times where you can bring a lot of really good players together who may fit on paper, but that chemistry, I feel like behind the scenes too, is just as important as the on court stuff. And that's just going to add to the overall success of this team too. So I really like that. I really like this addition a lot for the Minnesota Lynx. I'm excited to see what else they do. I'm excited for another year of Diamond Miller. Really excited for the future of this team. But yeah, that's the Minnesota Lynx signings. We got a couple more teams to go through here because it was a very, very busy period of free agency news, like I mentioned earlier. Let's talk about the Dallas Wings, because they did, in my opinion, what they had to do, and that was retain Kalani Brown and Satu Sabally. Obviously, last year, it felt like they're finally heading in a direction where they are improving every single time now. And Kalani Brown, I think the Wings front office called her like the best kept secret in the WNBA when they signed her last year. And I thought that was a great way to put it. I think it's huge that she was able to stay in Dallas, as well as Satu, who obviously won most improved player last year. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Dallas being able to retain both Kalani and Satu?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. This is a team that has been improving year after year, and a lot of these pieces are still pretty young. And so for them, really the key, they didn't need to sort of go make any type of splash. They just needed to keep this core together and continue to improve and go in that same direction they've been going. And it's really cool for Kalani too. I mean, basically out of the league not very long ago, and to see her kind of come back and thrive with Dallas last year, and then to the point where she's able to get this bag. I think she's a perfect backup.
Multi-year.
Yeah, good for her, right? And she's a perfect backup to Tierra McCowan. So I really love what the Wings are doing here too.
Yeah, and I think it was reported that she had like multiple offers from other teams, which like as she should. And so I think that was also huge for Dallas to keep her. Some other moves that I'll go by these ones kind of a little bit quicker. The LA Sparks did some movement. They received Monique Billings. They retained Leja Clarendon. They also received Kia Nurse in a trade from Seattle. There are a lot of guards on the Sparks team. So I'm interested to see like what other movements there are. I have a feeling they now also have like pretty much every single pick in this year's draft. They have, I think, the second, the fourth, and the eighth pick, if I remember correctly. And I feel like that, like with all this movement, I feel like that definitely tells us that they're going to be drafting Cameron Brink. Like, would you agree with that?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, we got to see who comes out. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to say,
Especially if
but
Paige decides to go back to school. I feel
yeah,
like.
yeah, right. Which she's hinted at. So we'll see if it happens. And you're right. They have 3 of the top 8 picks, and they're obviously in rebuilding mode at this point. So I love them keeping Lay around to as sort of that veteran in the locker room for what's going to be a very young, like you said, rebuilding team.
Mhm.
And we'll see where they go in the next few years. But yeah, clearly the Sparks are not contenders right now, and that's
Yeah, but
okay.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
they know
yeah.
that.
It's okay. It's okay to constantly work on yourself. That's the theme of this year.
We're
And
always
then
all trying to better ourselves, Cree. That's what it's all
exactly.
about.
Exactly. Life lessons with the LA Sparks. All right. Anyway, the Las Vegas Aces, they retained Sid Colson and Kia Stokes, and they signed Megan Gustafson. Oh my God. I hope I said that right. I always struggle because I read it differently in my head, and then I know it's not the same way as saying it out loud. But they signed Megan, and of course, her beloved corgi, Pancake, which metaphor of coast to coast. So I already think that's an amazing signing. But
Ooh,
Cal, what do you think?
that didn't occur to me. I like that. Yeah, I do think Pancake was the signing of the free agency so far, and a
He
close
even got his
second is
own graphic. It was
yeah,
incredible.
he did as he should have. He deserved it. He deserved it. A close second, I would say, is Sydney Colson. Huge free agent signing, massive. They, in all seriousness, like obviously she brings a lot more basketball wise than probably what a lot of people give her credit for. And you saw what she did when they had injuries in the finals last year. But also, like she's just the heart and soul of the team. You got to have her
Yeah.
around. And then Megan Gustafson.
As much as Asia likes to pretend she doesn't want her around, she wants her around.
We all know. We all know how it is. But I do
Yeah.
think Megan Gustafson was a big signing, just in terms of having that backup post who can basically do kind of what Kayla George did, but at a higher level. So, obviously, the Aces' depth is always the question, and they sort of answered that question in the finals last year. But I think Megan Gustafson just even sort of adds a level for them in that department, and we'll see how Kia Stokes looks health wise because obviously she was hurt in the finals last year. I don't know what her situation is, but Megan Gustafson had a pretty nice year last year with Phoenix. I think all things considered, so that she definitely is going to be asked to give them some quality minutes off the bench. I'm sure in the front court, and like I said, that's an upgrade for them in that department.
Absolutely. And then let's go to our last main team, which is the Atlanta Dream, who received Jordan Canada in a sign and trade after there were a lot of questions about who might land her. We talked a lot about guards and point guards with a lot of these teams. And it feels like, and even in our conversation with Ari Chambers just a few weeks ago, she said that this was going to be the free agency of the point guards. It was going to be which teams are going to get them. It seems like there's like less and less supply of them with just like the way basketball is going, but it still remains so important to have a true PG on your team. And the Dream did a really great job in acquiring Jordan Canada, had obviously an amazing season last year. It went from that training camp contract with the Sparks to being cored and now with Atlanta. I think this is a really good move for a really exciting team in Atlanta. They also received Aerial Powers and Tina Charles, who has made her return to the WNBA after, the weird last couple of years that it was. But I think honestly, like a lot of really solid moves for Atlanta to keep building on just the really good season that they had last year.
No question, especially Jordan Canada, like you said, I think is a key piece for them at the point guard position to go along with Alicia Gray, Ryan Howard, all that talent that they have, Cheyenne Parker, and they have a lot of talent now. I think this team has a very high level collection of individually good basketball players. And now the question is the challenge for Tanisha Wright is putting all these pieces together. Tina Charles hasn't played a WNBA game in quite a while. Ariel Powers hasn't necessarily looked like what we saw her be with the Mystics. Both, I'm sure, have something left in the tank, but integrating them in with what you had last year and then Jordan Canada as well, I think is going to be kind of the challenge for Tanisha Wright, and I definitely would expect some growing pains probably in May and in June for this team. And there's going to be some games where maybe they don't look like the sum of their parts, or however you want to say that. But there's also going to be some games later on in the season, I think, once they start clicking, where they can compete with about anybody in the league with who they can run out there.
Yeah, it's like a fun basketball puzzle, and I'm very curious to see how it gets solved. And then a couple of the last moves, just before we move on to some college talk. The Samuelson sisters both have new homes, with Katie Lou being in the Indiana Fever and Carly going to the Washington Mystics. I think, Katie Lou obviously coming back from maternity leave. I'm really excited to see how she's going to look on an Indiana Fever team that is going to be very exciting, especially with the draft coming up, with the player that they might add to this squad. And then Carly, who obviously, as we know, has been kind of in and out with the Sparks for a very long time, had a really, really great showing last year with them, and very much deservedly is going to the Mystics. And as I'm talking right now about the Mystics, I cannot believe I didn't write this in the doc, but Dee Richards was also signed by the Washington Mystics.
Let's go.
I am actually so mad at myself for not remembering to write that down. Her not being in the league last year was devastating. Like I said, I started covering the W with her and Mick in their rookie seasons with the Liberty. And so I was really sad when she got waived last year. So I am so happy to see her back. I'm really excited to see. I think it was a training camp contract that they signed her to. So really excited to see. And I think the Mystics also signed Emily Engstler as well, again, now that I think about it. So yeah, a lot of little minuscule signings to go along with really big ones. But point being, I'm so excited. The season is less than 100 days away. And these are all exciting moves. But Cal, do you have any thoughts?
That's 100 days. It's crazy when you frame it like that. It's so close. It's just like college ends.
Shout out to the Indiana Fever social media team, because they posted the 100 days till the W season graphic 2 days ago, and I sent it to Mark, and I was like, 100 days? That's crazy. But
it's
anyway,
next week. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You're right. I think. By the way, our friend Miles Ehrlich is going to disown you for not putting Dee in the doc, but it's all right. Maybe he won't listen to this. We'll see.
I'm sorry, Miles.
Miles, we blame it all on Cree. It's her fault. No, I think Carly is another one in particular. I think Carly Samuelson, just an example, and Dee, that when we talk about Jordan Canada going from a training camp contract and then Kalani Brown being out of the league, some of these players, there's a very clear moral of the story here is you can get cut and your stories could be just getting started. It's not done being written. And that's the cool thing about the WNBA. And I think we're seeing that all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that kind of wraps up our W free agency talk. I'm sure we're going to have so much more to talk about next week as well. But let's wrap that combo up for now and move on to some college basketball coming up right now. All right, Cal, let's coast through college with two of the biggest names in college basketball right now, and that is JuJu Watkins and Caitlin Clark. I know there was that whole fuss about pitting them against each other. We are not pitting them against each other. We are celebrating both because both are incredibly special. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you'll see that Calvin is saying, nope, we are not pitting them against each other. Let's talk JuJu first, because she obviously set the single game record on Friday, scoring 51 points, which was 51 out of USC's 67 points, which for all you math nerds out there was 76% of USC's points to defeat. And it wasn't even some random team. They defeated Stanford, who was ranked number 4 last week.
On the
let's
road.
talk about on the road and on the road. Yes. Let's talk about her greatness. Let's talk about that 51-point game. I literally tweeted out, I was like, I don't know if anybody knows this, especially if we're like women's basketball fans, but like in the NBA right now, there's like a whole discourse about if a player is going to reach 100 points in a game because they've been scoring like 70. And I just tweeted, forget the NBA discourse. JuJu's going to be the one to score 100 points in a game again, just because I was so hyped from that performance. But Cal, yeah, what do we think about that 51-point game?
It's remarkable because, like you said, on the road at number 4, it's obviously not the NCAA record. It was the USC record, and that's
Mhm.
already a big deal when you talk about who has played for USC and like Cheryl Miller, Lisa Leslie. There's some good players who've played there, and none of them did that. But when you look at some of the players who have dropped 50, and of course, a few years ago, Aoka Lee set the record with 61. And I don't want to take anything away from any of those, including Aoka, but none of them went and did it on the road at the number 4 team in the country. Aoka did it against Oklahoma. Good team, not a good defense, very fast paced. Obviously, she got to 60, but to me, this was about as impressive as of a scoring performance as you're ever going to see. And it's all because JuJu Watkins has maybe the best pull-up jumper that I've ever seen. And I don't say that lightly. And obviously there's a lot of things that we've talked about on this podcast that she can still add to her game. She can work on that posting
Her
up, for
post up, yeah.
example. She can, she's not the same level passer as Caitlin Clark is, and I'm sure she'll get there. She's a good passer. But in terms of just give her the ball, go get to your spot, rise and fire over someone who's right on you with hand in your face, who's playing great defense, and it doesn't matter because it's going in anyway. There's no one who can do that like her. I don't think Caitlin Clark is even doing that at the level that JuJu Watkins is. And it's crazy to think about where she's going to be in 2 years, 3 years, once she starts adding all this other stuff to her bag too, because you can't stop it. I don't care who you are and how good defense you're playing. You can't stop it. You just she's going to get the shot off, and it's either going to go in or it's not. And it's more often than not, it's going to go in. And the other night, all it was doing was going in. So I
Yeah, at
don't
one point
remember
you're
what
just
she
like,
shot.
did the other
Yeah.
team even score anything? Like you're just like, it's been all JuJu.
Yeah. All JuJu, all game. It was just pure theater. So fun to watch, and can't wait for the rest of her career.
And by the way, in case people have forgotten, this girl is a freshman. This is the definition of freshman fire, as we like to say on this pod. Happening in the world of college basketball and the world of basketball in general, like she is starting to transcend that, and it's been super cool to watch. And like you said, yeah, that pull up jumper is a beauty to observe. But yeah, JuJu Watkins, 51 points. If you're not tapped into USC this season, please do so. She is really special to watch. Let's move to the other player that we want to talk about, and that is Caitlin Clark, who moved to second in the NCAA scoring record behind Kelsey Plum, who I think said something about not being like nervous about Caitlin catching up because there's like some pressure that kind of comes with that record. And I think that's an interesting part of the conversation, especially with the conversations that have been happening around how Caitlin might do once entering the WNBA. I know that's been a very hot topic on the Twitterverse this week and on podcasts and other shows. And I think that element of pressure and maybe trying not to place so much pressure on these players is a really important one that I think we need to consider. But I know you have a fun fact. I know, first of all, how much you love Caitlin Clark, but I know you also have a very fun fact for us very excited listeners about this scoring record.
I do. I have to shout out if not them. I don't even know what it's called. If not for them, I think is the Twitter crowd. Well, Brenda Van Langen drew my attention to this, and I'm sure some other people have tweeted or wrote about this as well. But Kelsey Plum obviously has the Division I women's basketball scoring record, 3,527 points. She doesn't have the college basketball scoring record, and I'm not talking about Pistol Pete. He has the men's record. There's also Lynette Woodard, who played for Kansas and scored 3,649 points. Before the NCAA, it was the AIAW days. But there's also someone else that we really, really need to give some love to, and I want to talk about on this podcast. Pearl Moore played for Francis Marion College. There she is if you're on YouTube. The small college in South Carolina, again, in the AIAW several decades ago. She scored 4,061 points over her career. She didn't have a 3-point line, Crina. So it's even who knows how
Wow.
many points she would have scored. So I feel like it's pretty easy to erase history sometimes, especially when we don't have the same like level of highlights and social media type stuff from some of these older players. But Pearl Moore is someone I feel like I don't want her to get erased. Her name needs to be brought up anytime we talk about these scoring conversations. And I get it, like it was a small school or whatever is different than playing at like a Division I Final Four contender. But she dropped 4,000 without a 3-point line. Like I don't know what else to say. That's legendary. So
Yeah.
shout out to Pearl Moore. I don't know if Caitlin Clark's going to get there, but when Caitlin Clark passes Kelsey Plum, she's not the all-time college basketball scoring champion. I'm just going to say that. She will be the Division I women's champion.
I love all the fun facts, all the fun stats, as you very much well know. That is an incredible one. Yeah, I mean, it's also just kind of speaks to how incredible the college season has been this year and the last couple of years. Feels like we're heading in a really exciting direction. And I know, there's been a lot of really exciting stuff over the last like couple of like decades, but it's truly, truly feels like a special era that we're entering, especially as we start to get more media attention, just more eyes on the game. And I'm just really excited. I think like having players like JuJu, having players like CC is really good for the game. Saying JuJu and CC was kind of a trip in the same sentence, but um, they're just really, really cool players to watch. Obviously, both in different aspects of their career right now, one being a freshman and one about to enter the WNBA. So, yeah, no, just really, really cool to see them both kind of building out their legacies at a very young age. Because, like, even though they are in different parts of their career, they are still very, very young. And there is just so much potential to be tapped into over this next, like, decade and a half.
Absolutely. And it's so cool. Like I don't think Caitlin's coming back. If she did, we'd get to see them against each other in the Big Ten. But either way, just getting to see them both in college at the same time for 1 year is so cool. And seeing kind of like the different ways that they sort of explode for these crazy stat lines, but that they still could just completely take over a game at will when they want to. And before we move on, so Caitlin Clark, her next couple games, she might break the scoring record a couple games from now or 3 games from now, but a couple games from now, they play Nebraska. She's got a shot to get there. I actually hope she doesn't for a lot of reasons. I hope she gets to the game after, but I have to awkwardly segue from bringing up Nebraska in that regard to shouting out a couple people that I love for the shirt that I'm wearing, because a few weeks ago, any of our loyal listeners know that I said if anyone wants to send me gear, I'll wear it. I'll shout you out. We'll talk about your team on the podcast. And then a few weeks later, I got a surprise package, and it was one of those like you usually like you know what's coming, like you ordered something, but I didn't order anything, so I was like, "Huh, this is weird." Open it up. This amazing shirt was in there. All pots, no pans, from Jess Keller and Liv Butts, two of my favorite people. And Jess Keller is an assistant coach at Nebraska. So they sent me, this is for Natalie Potts, the freshman who I believe we've talked about on this pod, plays
We
for
have,
Nebraska.
yeah.
It's got her name and number on the back. It's very soft, by the way. It's an amazing shirt. Thank you so much to Jess and Liv. I love this shirt. And I'm wearing it all the time now. So I just had to shout them out and shout out Nebraska, who is going to get their shot on national TV against Iowa. We all know that Caitlin Clark in the record is the reason why they get those national TV games, but I'm so excited for the national audience to get to see Jazz Shelley, get to see Alexis Markowski, to get to see Natalie Potts, who barely misses. She's got some stats that we could get into that are crazy, irrelevant for this pod. But Jess, Liv, thank you so much. Go Huskers, and I love this shirt.
Can I just say, when we started this, we said we were open to getting stuff sent to us. Ever since then, Cal has received all the presents, and I have received nothing. So please, if you're listening to this, I would love some gear. I would love to give love to your favorite players. I'm very sad. I know I live in Canada, but I do have a boyfriend that lives in the States. So if you need to send it to his address, we will send it to his address and I will pick it up. So this is a PSA. I would like some gear too.
Someone send Cree some stuff. Hey, by the way, do you have like a favorite team other than TMU? Like a favorite team in the NCAA? We gotta get you some gear.
You say other than TMU, my own school.
Yeah, that's.
I love all. Actually, okay, no, I do have a favorite.
I'm putting you on the spot. I realize.
My favorite team is Stanford because they are the first college team that I followed extremely closely the year that they won the title, and that was the first time I ever really covered like a Final Four and then just kind of the championships in general. So Stanford was a team that I fell in love with. Arizona as well too. Really kind of, you know, when they had Ari McDonald, that was kind of the year that I started following college basketball, and so Stanford holds a special place in my heart. So if any Stanford people are listening, feel free to send me.
Yeah.
And I love Cameron Brink. I love Cameron Brink. Like, cannot even emphasize how much I love her. So
okay, so Cameron Brink, NIL gear, and or just Stanford, Arizona stuff in general. Someone needs to get on that. Send that stuff to Crina. She will wear it on the pod, speaking for you, but I'm sure you will.
Oh, I will. Absolutely, I will.
And we'll shout you out.
I will shine my ring light onto it. And yeah, it will be in the spotlight. Anyway, moving on. Okay. That's been our show. The last kind of segment, we're going to give you some games to watch because that's what we do here. First one being some college games happening this Thursday, February the 8th. In some ACC play, we have Notre Dame versus Louisville at 6 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. And then we have Virginia Tech versus NC State at 8 p.m. Eastern on ACC Network. Cal, some thoughts on these matchups, some thoughts on the conference that is the ACC. Go.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, it's a massive week in the ACC for who wins. If you want to put the standings up, I know Louisville has one loss at this moment. Actually, we're recording Monday. We're putting this out Tuesday. So this is going to be different by the time people are listening and watching to this. NC State and Louisville play each other Monday night. So one of those numbers in the loss column is going to go up there, which is another really big game, obviously. And then when you talk about NC State and Virginia Tech, 2 losses, and then Notre Dame, Syracuse right behind them with 3. It's really coming down to these 5 teams and really probably the top 3. But Notre Dame, if they want to have any shot, is going to have to win that game that you mentioned. And then Virginia Tech, NC State, of course, the rematch of that Elizabeth Kitley game winner that we broke down on this pod a month or so ago. So I think the implications for who wins the ACC championship this week are monumental. There's 2 or 3 games between these teams at the top that are going to really decide it, I think. So tune in. It's going to be exciting.
Can you believe that was a month ago now that we were breaking down Kitley's game winner? That feels
I don't even know if it was. I just threw out.
I think you're right because the last 2 episodes have been guests, and then so it's at least 2 weeks ago, which is like even
at least 3 weeks. You're right.
At least 3 weeks. Yeah, that's wild. And then the last kind of games to watch, we have Olympic qualifying tournaments from February 8 to 11. There are 16 nations competing. 10 will make it to Paris 2024. There are 4 groups scattered all over the world. Group 1, 2, 3, and 4. In Group 1 is Team USA. I just wanted to talk about how packed their original roster was for their training camp that they held in Brooklyn at Barclays. And they had like 18 people, and not even all of them made it to the Olympic qualifying tournament. So when they qualify, and they will, I'm very scared to see what USA would look like at the Olympics. That is going to be a very scary squad. That doesn't even, in the qualifying tournament, doesn't even include A'ja Wilson because she has her book tour coming up. And the fact that they're already so stacked without her is, it's a lot. And Aaliyah Boston is also getting her her chance in the qualifying tournament as well, which is exciting. In Group 2, we have teams like China and France. Obviously, if you're a Liberty fan, you'll be following Han Shu, Marine Johannes. And then there's like other players like Abby Williams playing for France as well. In Group 3, we have Brazil, where, if you're looking for that college connection, Camila Cardoso will be suiting up for them in the Olympic qualifying tournament. So she will miss a couple of South Carolina games, including their matchup against UConn. Cal, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, I hate it. South Carolina's going to be fine without her in general. She's an amazing player. That's not diminishing anything about her. South Carolina has proven that they can withstand things like that. But you'd much rather see her miss a game against whoever than the UConn game. Like, you want to see both teams. And I mean, it's obviously UConn's missing players too, so it's not any type of like excuse. It's just like, as a neutral fan, you want to watch the highest
we have some
level
breaking
basketball
news.
that you can.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We have some breaking
no.
news.
Hit me. What's
Chicago
going on?
Sky just signed Diamond DeShields. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me open this email.
Let's go, Diamond.
I was like, I can feel my watch like buzzing with notifications, and I was like, what is going on?
I'm
She's
glad
back.
You cut me off for that.
Yeah.
Let's
Diamond,
go.
There we
That's
go. Breaking news on the podcast.
Shout out to Diamond, by the way. Love Diamond DeShields. I
Incredible
love that
timing.
for this guy.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just reading. Yeah, of course, per team policy, terms of the agreement were not disclosed. But she says, they say if it's meant to be, it'll come back. And well, I'm back. That's from Diamond herself. Obviously returns after being drafted by the Sky in 2018. Very nice return from her. Really excited to see her come back from injury as well too, and just with everything that she's kind of gone through the last several years. So yeah, there's your breaking news on the podcast for you, which I guess will still be on Tuesday, but it was breaking news for us while we were recording.
Well, yeah, that was still fun. And Diamond, someone who still has so much potential and so much left to give this sport, I think. So I can't wait to see what she does with the Sky.
Yeah, incredible. Anyway, we were talking about Camila Cardoso missing the UConn game. Then we got breaking news. Diamond DeShields signs back with the Sky. And then the last thing I do want to say before we wrap up this podcast is Group 4 of the Olympic qualifiers has been called by FIBA the group of death. And I would just like to say, as the Canadian on this podcast, I am deeply offended because Canada is in this group. And that's all I'm going to say on that. But I really hope it doesn't end up being the group of death and that they'll be okay. But yeah, I just would like to say out of all the groups, that one had to be the group of death. And just for reference, that includes Spain, Hungary, Canada, and Japan, which, to be fair, are really great teams. But damn, that felt harsh. But anyway, that's
a compliment to Canada.
I hope so. But anyway,
you're right.
It's yeah, we'll see how it goes. But anyway, the Olympic qualifiers are February 8 to 11. They'll be scattered all over the world. So make sure you just check out FIBA's website to catch where and when those games will be played. Like I said, 10 out of the 16 nations will qualify for Paris 2024. Lots of exciting basketball coming up this season in college, then the W season, then we have it's an Olympic year. There's a lot going on. And thank you so much if you stuck around to the end of the podcast. Make sure you're following Her Hoop Stats on social media at Her Hoop Stats. You can catch myself at Crina MM, Calvin at CWetzel31, and we will see you next Tuesday.